Welcome to the first annual AOAC Sub-Saharan Africa section meeting. On behalf of the organizing committee, I'm honored and delighted to welcome you to the inaugural meeting. The creation of the Sub-Saharan Africa section of the AOAC International comes at a time when Africa stands at the food safety crossroads. With rising population across the continent and the forecasted increase in intra-African trade, food is essential to Africa's development. The use of accurate and reliable testing methods is critical to the process of ensuring foodstuff that reach the consumer are safe. The theme of this meeting, improving the quality and testing to assure food safety, public health, and trade, speaks directly to this need. The AOAC Sub-Saharan Africa section is a regional professional scientific association whose purpose is building confidence in analytical results. We're dedicated to promoting and advancing knowledge and best practices in analytical science in the region. We currently have about 290 members, and the diversity of the membership includes government representatives, persons from the academic community, industry, contract research, technology providers, and other organizations. This event marks a very, very important milestone for our development. Exactly 1 year ago, a small group of us met in Johannesburg to explore how we could develop an organization to drive the improvement of testing and testing standards in Sub-Saharan Africa by leveraging collective scientific knowledge and expertise within the region in a non-competitive environment. Our aim was also to set out a roadmap to achieve these goals. Our inaugural meeting serves to celebrate our achievements during the past year, share our learnings and challenges, while at the same time identifying new opportunities, engaging our stakeholders, and strengthening our partnerships. This process gives us what we need to define our priorities for 2019, to set out a roadmap for the years to follow. So we have put together a program with topics that we hope will excite and inform you in a relaxed, friendly, and respectful atmosphere, in which everyone's contribution is welcome and valued. The meeting program consists of 3 fundamental elements. Part 1 is assuring compliance, as well as the importance of sustainable capacity building. The second part deals with the fundamentals of analytics and how to maintain high performance in testing standards. And the third part of the program deals with overcoming challenges challenges facing us and preparing for the future. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors, whose contribution and whose support has made this event possible. I particularly like to mention our platinum sponsor, Waters Microset, as well as our silver sponsors, Psycorp Laboratories, and our bronze sponsors, HLUD, Helica Biosystems, PNAG, R Biofarm, Shimatsu, and Trans. In conclusion, I know that with your energy and commitment, we can accomplish much at this meeting. I'm very much looking forward to engaging, interacting, and meeting all of you, and wish you a productive and enjoyable meeting. Our first speaker is David Schmidt, and David is the Executive Director of AOAC International. David has a very long history in food safety and food control. So David is the principal. He was the principal consultant for Schmidt Commonwealth Strategies, LLC, from 2006 to 2015. He served as the President and Chief Executive Officer of the International Food Inspection Council and CEO of the IFIC Foundation, Washington, D.C. He joined the IFIC in 1993, and held positions from Director to Executive Vice President prior to being elected CEO. Dave, as he is known to his friends, I think we can all call him Dave. Also served as the first Bush's administration's Director of External Affairs at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Food Safety and Inspection Services, where he addressed food safety and nutrition issues and managed the inspection agency's media, legislative, consumer education program. He also gained a thorough understanding of the food industry in previous sales position with Oscar Myers Food, Pepsi-Cola USA, Canada Dry Corp. He holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Business Administration from Vanderbilt University, and completed graduate business studies at the University of New Orleans. He also served as a counselor in the town of Leesburg, Virginia, in the United States. So welcome, David. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you, Owen, and thank you for that warm South African reception. So I'm learning as well. This is actually my second time to South Africa. I was in Cape Town for an IUFOS meeting, I want to say 8 years ago, roughly 7 or 8 years ago, and just find Africa to be such a beautiful country. My wife and I did a safari in Kenya earlier this week before coming, and had a wonderful experience. So we're looking forward to getting down to business here. And the one thing we do have in common, this is your first section meeting officially under AOAC, and this is the first section meeting that I've gone to in my role at AOAC. So I just started May 1st as executive director, and very honored to be leading the staff of this organization that has so much important contributions to food safety around the world. So my task was just to give you a bit of an introduction to our organization today and talk about the role, the really important role that sections play in the success of our organization. So one of the things that's probably the best document, if you haven't seen this, to really understand AOAC International is the new strategy that was adopted before I arrived, so in December 2017. And this is up on our website. And you see through our board's collective efforts that our vision is to have global confidence in consistence-based analytical solutions for food safety, food integrity, and public health. And our mission that we've been working on, of course, since we were founded in 1884, is as a leader of analytical excellence, AOAC International advances food safety, food integrity, and public health by bringing together members, organizations, and experts dedicated to developing and validating standards, methods, and technologies of global relevance. And the goals that we're working on in order to achieve this strategy involve addressing emerging issues and influencing standards development as part of that analytical excellence role. And people are so critical, so that's involving attracting top staff to the organization, attracting members, and attracting section development, such as you've come together in such an impressive way today. Relationships, we felt coming in there was a need to really reestablish ourselves in many cases, but also building new partnerships with third-party organizations around the world, government agencies around the world, industry, and others as well. So our core programs, we've had excellent programs that have carried us through, such as our journal and other communications. Our official methods of analysis is really the heart of our organization. So we wanted to sort of refresh and sustain some of these very successful programs that we've had for many years, and also see if we can improve them along the way too. Sustainability, as any organization, really needs to look at how you're meeting the current needs of your members and others, but we as an organization need to look to the future, to how we can sustain. We know that this is such an important organization to food safety around the world, but it does take funding and other ways to keep us fresh and to keep our people inaugurated as well. And then finally, governance. Working at our board level, there's been an effort to make sure that our governance is as highly effective as it can be, and then providing a leadership culture that's of value to all of our members and stakeholders. So we're having another board training session around this theme at our annual meeting, at our board meeting in December coming up. So just to give you an example of how we're working to implement this plan, since I've come on board, I felt very lucky to have a very clear strategy presented to me, and now it's about executing that strategy. So we've been working, as you see, we're now in the fourth quarter of this plan, and I want to show also that sections are a very important aspect of accomplishing our strategy. And Eric Konings of Nestle, who's here with us, is leading a presidential task force on sections, looking at how we can really help lift the sections and better integrate the role that sections play for AOAC International, and making sure that we're helping to support sections from our staff level as best as we can too. We have others aspects we're looking at, looking at how we operate around international travel. Let's see if I can get this straight here. There we go. We're going to have a number of recommendations for our board in December involving international representation policy. Also, we have marketing strategy where we're reviewing all of our membership value proposition, and also taking a look at how section membership can tie into international organization membership as well. So we'll be looking at some recommendations through the task force, talking about this in December, And as you're a new organization developing, we hope we can all learn and improve this whole relationship between AOAC International and sections overall. And so just to give you a view of what we're working on leading into next year as well, with our business plan, our organization has involved lots of training successfully in the past, and then some of those programs sort of ebbed, or we decline offering those opportunities. But this is going to become a bigger part of our offerings in the future. So we want to make more people, whether it's industry, academia, or government, familiar with how our methods development process works, and making sure we're providing the training and the tools necessary to take full advantage of this. So you'll see some new offerings, perhaps as early as our mid-year meeting next year, and certainly at our annual meeting in Denver next year, involving education and training. We know that our website is really not up to date with today's common standards for just being user-friendly and providing an easier way for you to access information and share it with your other stakeholders and constituents as well. So we will be going under a website redesign that our board is expected to approve in December, and it'll take most of a year to make this operational. But as you know, there is currently an area for sections on the website, but we think we can improve that information, and by increasing our dialogue among our staff and your operations, we can also help you and help publicize some of the efforts that you're making at the section level. Also, our member database we're working on in our EOMA platform, the way you can electronically access, members can access our official methods of analysis. And that technology is on very old technology, so we have a whole nother effort we're working on to shore it up and to make sure it's sustainable for the future too. So we hope both of those things are going to be happening in the future. One of the things from a generation standpoint, we have such strong members and dedicated members, but as the new generation comes up, we want to make sure we're transferring this leadership and guidance as it develops. So we're going to be having a more formal mentoring initiative so that some of our really experienced, dedicated members can transfer some of this creative missions that they've had for so many years to ensure that the next generation of method developers is going to be coming along well. So if you are interested in helping with this, certainly let us know, but that's going to be an important effort for us. Also, we want to make sure that our annual and mid-year meetings are as beneficial as they can be for our members, so you'll see some changes in those meetings and trying to refresh the content of it as we go through the next couple of years. We also have a number of new products involving consulting and other aspects of our programs that we've been talking through focus groups with many of our members to try to validate new ideas that we have, or some that we had maybe aren't working so well, depending on some of the feedback. So we're going to take that forward. You'll see some new product launches there. And then, as many of you know, because of the interest in cannabis from many states in the U.S., the government of Canada has just approved it. There are a lot of products coming onto the market, even in food products, of course, containing cannabis that have not had the benefit of methods to really understand how you test for some of these things to ensure food safety. So we've had many organizations, both government and non-government, coming to us for help with this. And so we actually have a thought leader meeting on cannabis methods development next week in our offices in Rockville, Maryland. So you'll be hearing more about that. And we do have this cannabis analytical science program that should officially launch early next year. So when it comes to the importance of partnerships, as I mentioned, sections play such a big role with that. And you see, really internationally, we are well established in terms of organizations and experts that come to us all over the world to participate in our working groups in other ways through our methods development. And now with you becoming such a substantial force down here in South Africa, and involving, I think it's the 49 nations in this section, I think that's just such a tremendous base for us, and it helps join many of the other efforts you see around the world. So, getting the best expertise we can around our methods developments really does leverage the power of many. So looking at sections and how we see the role of AOAC sections overall, we do want to promote the common interest of association members in specified areas of analytical science. so that you can get together and determine where it makes sense to combine efforts on behalf of society. It provides an opportunity for individuals to participate actively in their international associations. You can feel better connected to AOAC International by some of the work that you may get involved with in the local sections. Hopefully we're providing an opportunity to increase communication and interaction among persons of similar interests, so you can often set up your own communities within sections to better follow your needs development. So some of the way that sections help support international standards development, you can establish a regional platform to bring together scientists in your area, discuss local regulatory issues, and many of these issues you may find are similar to issues that sections in other regions are dealing with as well. So to participate in standards development, you're bringing them to the AOAC meetings, whether it's our mid-year meeting or annual meetings. We love to have sections recommend experts to come in and help support some of our working groups underway. You can help provide that input on draft standards during comment periods. When we announce call for methods, we think sections can be even more involved than they have been in helping to refer that call for methods. And then there's the opportunity to harmonize local methods with international methods. Capacity building workshops that we've seen many do at the regional level. And we want to have validation studies for official methods of analysis, and in many cases, of course, leading to codex standards, whether we're harmonizing with ISO or other organizations. These are goals that you can help with, and we would love to hear about your priorities and how they can impact your own region. So just to make sure you are focused on our meetings coming up, we were very pleased to have a great representation delegation from the Sub-Saharan Africa region in Toronto this past year. We will be in Denver for our 133rd annual meeting. That's September 8th through 11th in Denver, Colorado next year. And then prior to that, we will have our mid-year meeting in Rockville, Maryland, March 11th through 15th coming up. And I saw that Owen already had this picture here, but we were very pleased. This was a real highlight of our last meeting in Toronto when we did present the gavel to Owen, and I was looking for that thing to be gaveled into place here today, but it was an impressive gavel, and I was pleased to help present that. And I know Deanne Benesh will be with us later this morning, a very proud moment for her too. As you know, she's been so involved in helping to develop this as our immediate past president while she was president. So looking at how you can further participate during our annual meetings, so the Denver meeting, and there is an opportunity to meet and engage potential new section members who literally could show up at our meeting and may not even be aware of your efforts here. You can also network with other section leadership at the meeting. We saw a lot of that happening this time. There's access to the AOAC International Board of Directors, making your thoughts and concerns known to them during the meetings. And one of the things that was instituted last year, I thought it was one of the best sessions in the whole annual meeting, and that was one that Eric and Dan Benesh helped organize, and that was what drives AOAC sections around the world. So some of these section leaders from various sections, and Owen presented very well on behalf of your section here, and it was just very interesting to share not only progress that was being made, but perhaps some concerns and questions and how you could operate more efficiently or whether you needed more help from our international staff. So I found it very informative. We are planning to have another similar session at the Denver meeting as well. So love to have your input for that. And then there is an ongoing Committee on Sections meeting that does involve the leaders of the different groups, that they can meet at the annual meeting and have their own discussions on some of these issues. So taking a look at how these harmonization efforts that I alluded to earlier, one example is the first AOAC and ISO agreement that was signed in 2012. It was really focused on milk and milk products to participate in each other's standards development activities. They were jointly submitted to the Codex process by AOAC, ISO, and the International Dairy Federation for dispute resolution status. And 12 of these final action methods were submitted into the Codex process. So it's been a very successful partnership, and I was very pleased to be able to participate in sort of the next step in this partnership that we just signed with ISO in last month in Washington. We'll be cooperating through a broader array, potentially, of food products in the ISO Technical Committee 34, which was meeting in Washington. So there'll be also active participation and revision of ISO standards for alternative micro method validation as well. So you can see the opportunity to get this great harmonization, which is so beneficial to trade through many of these initiatives. And I think also to show you some examples of how sections can really take it up a notch, as we say in the US. The food safety, the AOAC section in India had an agreement with the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, signed in May of 18, earlier this year, where the opportunity was really identified by the Indian Section Executive Committee. And the agreement involves food testing analysis, method sharing, method development, method validation, and I know some recent updates we've had on training. They've had highly successful events that they're working very closely in partnership with the government of India and the section. And then in China, we had an agreement signed in April 2017 with the China Institute of Food Science and Technology, and that was in Beijing. And it's an ongoing effort to promote AOAC and the GB method comparison and joint development of new standards as needed by the National Health Commission. So we think, we'd love to see it. I know it's great to see such strong participation from the government already in the sections here from the many countries that you represent. So I think there's opportunity for many of these more formal agreements to advance all of our organizations. So just reviewing, so how we can partner on capacity building overall. It really takes this cooperative relationship among government agencies, research and academia, NGOs, and industry, and these can apply in areas of standards development, methods, publications, such as the Journal of AOAC International, and proficiency testing. And that's something just in my short tenure we've seen a lot of interest from other government agencies and others, how they can perhaps model some of the efforts that we do with proficiency testing. So looking at how global acceptance and use of AOAC methods really operates from a process standpoint. First it's a commitment to international engagement that you start with. Encourage global participation in AOAC standards development, and then go forward with method development, validation, and publication in our journal. Then you look at implementation, proficiency testing, and laboratory quality. And then finally, global acceptability of AOAC methods and global defensibility with AOAC methods that does lead to helping to become a problem solver in terms of trade resolution. So in terms of contributing to global capacity in support of food safety, it's really critical to maintain and leverage current networks, and even more importantly, to continue to grow and nurture new networks. And that's where we're so excited that you're going to be able to help in this effort from a tremendous standpoint. So with that, I thank you again for having me here today. I look forward to meeting many of you over the next couple of days and wish you much success in this meeting. So thanks again for having me.
Move to our keynote presentation, which will be done by Dr. Yves Gatzika. Yves is currently the first female president of the African Organization for Standards. Yves has enjoyed an illustrious professional career which spans 25 years in the public and private sector. She was appointed to the current position of Director General and Board Company Secretary for the Standards Association of Zambia in 2008. During her tenure at SAS, she has led a diverse team of technical professionals and has presented her organization with distinction on national, regional, and international platforms. So Yves has organized board contacts in governments, private sector, civil society, on issues related to standards, conformity assessment, corporate governance, and business ethics. Yves is an experienced medical pathology laboratory scientist and has an extensive proficiency testing experience. Eve is also a certified coach practitioner. So Eve, welcome.
Good morning to you all, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone looks very serious. That's better. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Owen for inviting me to speak at such an occasion. I feel honored to be here, to be representing the African Organization for Standardization, and also to be representing my own country, Zimbabwe. I'm here to deliver the keynote presentation. I was trying to decide whether I should do a PowerPoint presentation or just to read a speech. So I went with the latter because I thought you'd focus on me rather than the screen. Okay, so the topic I'm going to be speaking on in my keynote is the importance of standardization in the context of regulatory compliance in a continental free trade zone, a case of African continental free trade area, African CFTA. And I'm presenting this after the welcome remarks, which have created a very good foundation for my keynote, having fully understood why we are here. And also to just mention here that I'd like to recognize the protocols that are present. It gives me great pleasure to join you, the meeting of the AOAC Sub-Saharan Africa section inaugural meeting in my capacity as ASO President, and also to congratulate AOAC for this noble achievement of launching this chapter or this section of Sub-Saharan Africa. As a way of background and historical context, ASO, which is the African Organization for Standardization, is an intergovernmental body established by the Organization of African Unity, currently the African Union, and it was also established by the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA, in 1977, to harmonize standards and conformity assessment regimes, and to facilitate inter-Africa trade and integrate, as well as help in promoting participation of the African continent in international trade. Specifically, ASO's mandate is to harmonize national and sub-regional standards as African standards, and also to issue necessary recommendations to member states for this purpose. Specifically, ASO's mandate is to initiate and coordinate the development of African standards, or ARS, African Regional Standards, with references to products which are of particular interest to Africa. ASO is also there to encourage and facilitate adoption of international standards by member bodies, as well as to promote and facilitate exchanges of experts and information and cooperation in training of personnel in standardization activities. ASO is also there to coordinate the views of its members at International Organization for Standardization, which is ISO, at IEC, at OIML, at Codex, and other international organizations concerned with standardization activities. It is also there to create appropriate bodies in addition to the organs of the organization for the purposes of fulfilling its objectives. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to take this opportunity to say a few words about the development agenda of Africa. May I highlight that the Africa-wide development agenda, as championed by the African Union, is focused on regional integration and the formation of an African Economic Community, as laid out in the 1980 Lagos Plan of Action for the Economic Development of Africa and the Abuja Treaty of 1991 under the African Union in 2013. As we are all aware, regional integration refers to the process in which countries enter into a regional agreement in order to enhance regional cooperation through regional institutions and rules in various sections, and it is manifested in different forms. I'll just outline some of these areas of regional integration that have already begun. Firstly, the Preferential Trade Area, or PTA, agreement or preferential conditions, such as lower customs duties or higher import quotas for certain goods. I'm sure you're all aware also that we do have what we call the Free Trade Area, FTA, which is an extensive reduction of trade restrictions between the member states, usually covering the overall trade of goods. Thirdly, we also have the Customs Union, which really refers to the elimination of internal trade restrictions and introduction of common external tariffs. We also do have the Common Market, which is an expansion of the freedom of movement of goods to the elimination of obstacles in other areas, such as free movement of capital, services, and labor. And lastly, Economic Union, which is the establishment of a uniform internal market, including the harmonization of national policies and of the economic framework. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a roadmap that Africa is following. And it is important for us to realize the context around which all this work is taking place. For Africa, the roadmap for integration is defined within the treaty establishing the African Economic Community, the Abuja Treaty, which was laid out detailed timeframes and schedules for the African economic political integration through 6 stages. The first stage, which took place between 1994 and 1999, establishing and strengthening the African regional economic communities. Between 2000 and 2007, eliminate tariff barriers and also non-tariff barriers, NTBs, for regional economic communities. As far back as 2008 to 2017, Africa started talking about establishing a free trade area and also customs union. This is a very ambitious roadmap, and I'm sure you can understand how complex it is with 54 countries having to work together. So some of the timelines do not seem to speak to where we are now. However, we do realize that between 2018 and 2019, the establishment of the Continental Free Trade Area has taken center stage, with the hope that by 2020 to 2023, we'll see the establishment of the African Common Market. I was just joking with somebody today as I was coming here to say, this is very ambitious considering how long it took the European Union to do this. You can imagine with Africa, with its 54 countries and the timelines that we're working around. And by 2024 to 2028, we are hoping that in Africa, we'll have established a Pan-African economic and monetary union. Maybe we should just say, watch the space. Let's hope that by the time we get there, we will have achieved some of these milestones. In terms of regional integration, ladies and gentlemen, the momentum to achieve the Africa Regional Integration Agenda was reinforced by the Constitutive Act of the African Union of 2001 under COMESA, AOAC SADC Tripartite Initiative, and importantly, the 2012 decision by the African Union Assembly of Heads of State to fast-track the establishment of a continental free trade area by 2017, and also to boost inter-Africa trade. The good news is therefore, that at the African Heads of State Extraordinary Summit on the 21st of March 2018 in Kigali, Rwanda, 44 heads of delegation ratified the landmark African Continental Free Trade Area, African CFTA Treaty, and that 27 leaders signed a protocol establishing the African Economic Community relating to the free movement of people, the right of residence in the signatory countries, and the right of establishment, in addition to the 43 heads of delegations signing the third protocol, dubbed the Kigali Declaration, to formally launch the African Continental Free Trade Area, were truly significant positive steps for Africa's integration agenda. The African Continental Free Trade Area and Agreement is lauded as possibly the biggest trade agreement since the establishment of the World Trade Organization, WTO, and a concrete and provable step towards African Renaissance and also the Africa vision. I also want to highlight that a few experts have already spoken about what they perceive to be the Africa we want. Experts such as Mevel and Simon and Stephen in 2012 highlighted that the fact that the African Free Trade Area is poised to contribute significantly to the increased competitiveness of Africa's industrial products through harnessing economies of scale of a large continental market, increased rate of diversification and transformation of Africa's economy, and better integration of the continent at a global level. May I also highlight now and speak a little bit about the issues around standards, because what we have formed today in launching the section, the Sub-Saharan section of AOAC, speaks to the issues around standards and technical regulations. We are much aware that deepening of globalization and integration and the related trade agreements, including free trade areas after the Second World War, were facilitated by the systematic reduction of trade barriers through the elimination of trade quotas and the simplification and lowering of trade tariffs, especially arising from the negotiation of the GATT in 1945, which gave birth to a new family of barriers introduced to govern the world trade in terms of standards and technical regulations, as well as conformity assessment and things like accreditation. And progressively, these have evolved to be the main challenges facing the international trade system due to the variation in certification, testing, inspection practices, and standards used by different countries and regions. And in Africa, in particular, we do recognize the very different developmental stages that every country is facing. Therefore, these challenges around standards and technical regulations become even more important. Standards and technical regulations define what can or cannot be exchanged and outline the procedures under which such exchanges are or are not permissible. Technical regulations and standards are neither efficient nor effective if they are not complied with or cannot be effectively enforced. Like any other free trade area, the issues of technical barriers to trade are a challenge, and the need to develop systems for regulatory compliance is fast being realized. As much as there is a general agreement that Africa might be entering a new phase in its pursuit to boost inter-Africa trade and to deepen regional integration through the African Continental Free Trade Area, experts warn that this will only be made possible if the African Continental Free Trade Area is shaped as a comprehensive legal framework suitable for the 21st century challenges, and the technical barriers to trade, TBTs and standards and technical regulations and conformity assessment regimes, which have long been standing challenges to Africa's integration, given the different trade policy challenges amongst the regional economic communities. I'd like to speak to the NTMs and the TBTs now. Ladies and gentlemen, leaders and policymakers are awake to the reality that under the African Continental Free Trade Area, African countries would be confronted with the main challenge of the need to improve the quality of regulation, to remove NTMs and TBTs in goods, and to deliver comprehensive markets, whilst at the same time achieving essential policy and objectives relating to issues such as health, safety, and protection of agriculture from pests and disease. The private consumers will demand safety and quality assurance, and the public authorities will continue to scrutinize imported and exported goods for compliance as governments introduce more and more regulatory requirements to address inter alia health, safety, and environmental issues in accordance with the WTO TBT agreement and the rights and obligations of members. Experts and policymakers and the trade scholars under UNCTAD in 2015, Jensen, have emphasized that to benefit from the African CFTA, Africa must focus on working towards a common regulatory framework aimed at improving regulatory compliance and also reducing technical barriers to trade, as major inconsistencies amongst African countries and regions. Focus should be on standards, as well as technical regulations and conformity assessment regimes. Given the above scenario, ladies and gentlemen, which I've painted, the multiplicity of standards and technical regulations, perceptions in most African countries are based on different national and regional standards and conformity assessment regimes, and are unpredictable, is likely to have a negative impact on the operations of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Ladies and gentlemen, I therefore would like to stress that this context that has been painted here, both the tripartite free trade area and the African Continental Free Trade Area, show the inclination of the African governments to rival mega regional agreements, such as the recently signed Trans-Pacific Partnership or the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. The two initiatives could prove instrumental in spurring the opportunities and collaboration amongst countries and with national standards bodies to share and implement similar regulatory frameworks and the development of national legislative and regulations based on the harmonized African standards to achieve a predictable and harmonized continental technical regulatory framework. It would be remiss of me not to talk about transparency, because amongst the substantive provisions under the WTO agreement, grouped into 4 interrelated areas, which include the section on the encouragement of members to rely on harmonized standards, and on the transparency and the development and application and implementation of standards and technical regulations. Transparency is required by African governments to be able to trade with each other. The African Union document on boosting inter-Africa trade and the establishment of the Continental Free Trade Area highlights the responsibilities of the African countries and the regional economic communities in the African CFTA program to boost the inter-Africa trade and to have effective quality infrastructure. The Continental Free Trade Area members will need to appreciate and also to recognize the importance of standards and the importance of metrology and conformity assessment and accreditation, as well as proficiency testing, and facilitate their harmonization, as well as the mutual product recognition, and to develop and adopt a policy framework consistent with the provisions of the relevant WTO agreement, which was signed in 2012. I'd also want to just highlight that standards are really important. The elimination of tariff and non-tariff barriers and the regulatory compliance called for by the Continental Free Trade Area Initiative offers African countries a great long-term opportunity to address the TBTs and the issues around that. The African Continental Free Trade Area binds all state parties to commit to the progressive elimination of tariffs and non-tariff barriers in trade, in goods, and to ensure that the regulatory compliance, as emphasized under the WTO TBT SPS agreement, which under Article 2 talks about technical regulations, and Article 4 talks about standards, and Article 5 talks about conformity assessment, emphasizing the regulatory compliance and harmonization of such. The TBT Annex under Article 5 speaks specifically to the fields of cooperation and the need to be able to cooperate, which has provided the state parties to cooperate and to develop and also to implement standards, technical regulations, and conformity assessment procedures, as well as accreditation methodology and capacity building. I'm therefore delighted that AOAC speaks to these issues in its objectives and in its business plan, as we have heard earlier on. I'd like to perhaps end here by saying that for better regulatory compliance under the African Continental Free Trade Area, harmonization is the way to go in order to facilitate a common regulatory framework. Regional integration and development support organizations in Africa to become increasingly aware that the development of the continent hinges specifically on embracing standardization and with the fast tracking of its establishment of the African Continental Free Trade Area. There is an increasing concerted effort and focus on designing a continental scheme to deal with all these issues. And I'm pleased to say, under the African Continental Free Trade Area, the framework that has been developed by the continent speaks to a pan-African quality infrastructure. And this structure has organs such as AFRAC, AFSEC, AFRIMEDS, and of course, ASO. And I believe that this is a key pillar to enable Africa to be integrated under the African Continental Free Trade Area. And under the Pan-African Quality Infrastructure, we do have, firstly, the development of effective quality infrastructure and necessary policy frameworks. We also are raising awareness and creation of policymakers and governments on the importance of standardization and effective national quality infrastructure, because we cannot do it alone as technical people. We need to involve our governments so that they are aware that there's need for national quality policy in the various countries. There's also need for national quality councils to be formed, as well as technical regulatory frameworks to be established. Also, under this Pan-African quality infrastructure, we're talking about encouraging transparency in standards and technical regulations and the development of harmonization to promote the understanding of what is regulated and where standards are actually used to meet regulatory objectives. We also want to encourage and also to adopt the action plans for the upgrade of quality infrastructure by means of capacity building and facilitation of exchange of technical know-how. We also want consulting of all the parties who are involved in making sure that technical regulations becomes a topical issue, and the need for exchange of information in regulation and conformity assessment procedures, as well as leveraging on the benefits of the mutual recognition agreements where African countries will recognize one another's testing and certification requirements as acceptable without undertaking its own testing or retesting. As we all know, this increases costs within our various governments. As I draw to a conclusion, I would like to just underscore the role of ASO, the African Organization for Standardization. Under ASO, it does have 13 technical harmonization committees, and ASO, through the African experts drawn from all the African countries who are members of ASO, have continued to harmonize African standards in line with the ISO IEC guidelines and also WTO TBT agreement. And ASO, through the ASO Conformity Assessment Committee, ASO CACO, also has continued to harmonize conformity assessment regimes in the continent and also to facilitate certification programs, including the promotion of mutual recognition agreements. ASO under is ASO DISNET, which is the arm of ASO that really works on documentation and information networks. ASO has promoted the dissemination of standardization and trade requirements and information amongst African countries. Currently, the organization is facilitating the development of African Trade Web Portal as a platform for exchanging standards and trade requirements of the African products amongst the member states. And ASO has also been working on the greater awareness creation. ASO started what we call the African Day of Standardization in the year of 2013 in order to create an opportunity amongst the member states on awareness creation on the challenges of the technical barriers to trade in Africa and the need for action to support the development and growth of the market-driven system. ASO has also initiated capacity building, apart from training workshops and seminars, standards education programs in the school system, and also we hold what we call the ASO Standardization Assay Competition, which is aimed at the African youth on the continent, especially within the African universities since 2013, and this has been very successful. And in collaboration with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, the promotion of the development of regional value chains as a basis for improving intra-regional and intra-Africa trade, which follows an important step towards greater integration of Africa. Together with the African Union, UNECA, UNEP, ASO is fronting the first Africa eco-label to be implemented under the harmonized Africa eco-labeling standards, and currently available in the various sectors of our economy. In the agricultural sector, we are running this program. We're also running it in tourism and in forestry and fisheries. This is a sustainability program because in Africa, we believe that we have to be sustainable. And the initiative is geared towards promoting a critical area of our development, which is sustainability in these critical areas. Finally, and in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I know this has been a long speech, but I believe that these issues that I've highlighted above are critical in our development. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to re-emphasize that due to their mandate and influence on the establishment of the legal and institutional framework for regional compliance, quality governance institutions in Africa like ASO and PACI, which is a Pan-African Quality Infrastructure Institutions, and the National Bureaus of Standards and Regulatory Bodies have a decisive influence on the question of what degree technical barriers to trade in terms of standards and technical regulation and conformity assessment will present a stepping stone, or rather a stumbling block towards the implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area. These are issues that are pertinent, and I hope that this week we will find time to speak to each other about these issues. I therefore once more reiterate that this event that we're hosting today, the launch of the Sub-Saharan Africa section of AOAC, will present an opportunity for us to do likewise. Therefore, please join me in congratulating AOAC in this noble achievement of launching this section of the, of this noble organization. And I want to present myself to this delegation today to be able to interact with all of you for the purposes of getting to understand what the other issues are that we need to incorporate in our agenda. I thank you very much for your attention.
Could we please give another, what do you call it? Round of applause for each, please. So I'd like to introduce the chair for the next session. I think we're running sort of 50 minutes late, but I think we were able to cover a bit of time. I'd like to introduce the chair of the next session, Professor Samuel Godefroy. So Samuel, or Sam, or Sammy as friends call him, is a full professor of food risk assessment and regulatory compliance, regulatory policies at the Department of Food Science, Faculty of Agriculture at University of Laval, Quebec, Canada. So Sam is currently leading the development of food risk analysis and regulatory excellence platform. This is hosted at the Institute of Nutrition and Functional Foods of University of Laval. Before joining University of Laval, Sam completed. Sorry, my eyes are not doing too well with the quality, with the lighting intensity. So, 1 year ago, I think I was able to read much better than this in the light. Sam assumed the senior food regulatory position at the executive level of the Health Canada for over 10 years, including the position of Director General at the Health Canada's Food Directorate, the Food Standards Setting Organization of Canada from 2009 to 2015. Sam also served as the Vice Chair of the FAO-WHO Codex Alimentarius Commission, the International Food Standards Setting Body from 2011 to 2014. During his tenure, Sam led the development and facilitated the adoption by consensus of the organization's 2014-2019 strategic plan. Sam currently serves as the senior food science and regulatory expert in a number of advisory bodies and committees, domestically and internationally, including the International Advisory Committee of China Center for Food Safety, Risk Assessment. Sam also served as a strategic and operational advisor to international food safety capacity building initiatives focused on regulatory enhancement implemented in the United States Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Sam has authored over 80 scientific publications and book chapters, and is an international editorial board member for various scientific journals related to food safety and nutrition. Sam holds a PhD in analytical chemistry from the University of Pierre et Marie Curie. This is from Paris, and he also holds several degrees in chemistry, biochemistry, chemical engineering from the same university, and from École Nationale Supérieure de Chimie de Paris, France. So welcome Sam, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Owen, for this kind introduction, and good morning to you all, ladies and gentlemen. It's a true privilege to be with you this morning and to witness the inaugural meeting of the AOAC section for Sub-Saharan Africa. I would like also to echo the remarks of Dr. Gadzikwa and of all of you probably here to congratulate the region, the Sub-Saharan Africa region, for the creation of this section, but also to congratulate AOAC for this achievement. It's a building stone towards hopefully further harmonization of analytical testing in the region and throughout the world. So again, congratulations. Really a privilege as well to serve as one of the chairs of the session for this inaugural meeting. So we're going to actually continue setting the stage for the technical discussions that you're going to have throughout the week. Again, putting really an emphasis on food safety as an enabler for public health, for trade, and for economic development, and how building trust in analytical results is actually a contributor to building food safety systems and enhancing the confidence in the systems. So to continue in some presentations really around this theme, we have the privilege to have with us this morning Dr. Ravi Pillay, who is the Director of Corporate Affairs for Nestle East and Southern Africa region. He has held this position since 2010 and actually is quite knowledgeable in the region, has had a number of commercial positions with the food sector, but also served as a commercial attaché of the South African Embassy in Switzerland. Dr. Pillay will speak to us about building trust in food safety systems to promote public health and trade, the very theme of this conference. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Pillay.
Thank you very much. I think just a correction there. I didn't come from a graduation ceremony, so I'm still working on my PhD. It's in motion. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and honorable guest dignitaries. It's really a privilege and a pleasure to be here. I qualified with Owen and John B. a little bit beforehand that I don't have any vast analytical and chemical and all sorts of complicated formulae in my mind and in my academic background. However, as I was sitting, in the back and hearing and getting the feeling of what we're here to achieve, and I sometimes wonder, as Eve mentioned, this whole story about harmonization and our narrative about standards, what we really not, I think, bring into some of the discussions is what impact this could have in a more humane way. In South Africa, 1 in 3 babies are born malnourished. 15 million people go to bed hungry and wake up hungry. And if you could just translate these statistics in the rest of the continent, and as I got to work more and more in the continent and also in my European experience working with donor agencies, etc., we often wonder why sometimes things take so long. And when we spoke with Owen a few weeks ago, the discussion was about what sort of message could come. Of course, this is not a posturing position. It's not a time to show off the capabilities of Nestle, which is a global food company. However, as we go through my very short presentation, and just to qualify, unlike Eve, you have to look there because it's on PowerPoint. I'm not as well endowed facial-wise to focus on me, and Monday morning is not my best day, so I apologize for the PowerPoint. It just helps to distract the content away from me as well. So building trust in food systems, the next time I'll definitely change this title and say, how can we move millions of people more out of poverty by actually getting our standards and capabilities organized so that we can be engines of free trade promotion versus actually just stopping it at a level short of saying that. In terms of the Nestle commitments to consumers, quality and safety is always a top priority. How confident is a mom or a dad opening the cupboard, just whatever product it is from any company in the world, and just confidently just taking and serving 3 or 4 spoons of whatever product and giving it to her child? I mean, that is the ultimate safety, and we take it for granted. Quality assurance and product safety is one of our 10 most important reasons for existence, and to the extent that it's actually integrated into our corporate business principles, which is the Nestle Constitution and basically our license to trade. Our worldwide consumer service agencies, the consumer calls as Nestle in the region, we get about 3,000 contacts per month, and all those contacts originate from a telephone number or a WhatsApp contact detail on the tin, so that it allows an engagement way for consumers to talk to us about the products and what are the issues that a consumer would want to know. And we're also proud to say that more recently, we've got a 24/7 capability of contact in case there is an issue with a consumer. And that's essentially how we build trust. Why do we build trust? Of course, as an organization and as a business, you want to improve your confidence level of consumers so that everyone in society can benefit, both the shareholder and the consumer as well. Just Nestle at a glance. Globally, we have over 339,000 employees in 150 odd countries, and then many factories, as you can see, many products. And I think for us, what the key part is here is our investment in R&D and is quite substantial, and maybe that's something we also need to pick up in some of our informal discussions during the breaks as well. How can, this is just one organization investing so much in this field, and what could we do as we lead a charge towards organizing more efficiently this whole concept of testing and harmonizing and standard setting as well. We've got many R&D capabilities. For example, the organization where Owen comes from, I believe, is one of the most eminent research capability organizations in the European context, and with over 400 people with PhDs doing research stuff on food. And there's an openness, I think, to unlock that capability for the benefit of a broader context in what we're trying to do here over the next couple of days in Pretoria as part of the AOAC. We also have system research in very particular aspects. For example, with the coffee business, as you know, may know that Nestle is very much involved in coffee, and there's a particular body of knowledge with scientists and application group people that look at specific projects on how to make things more efficient and how to actually expand the product portfolios as well. And then very briefly, just to talk about the centers of R&D. For example, in Johannesburg, we have the Nestle Quality Management System facility, and this is also something which we need to start unlocking and seeing how much of the capacity that we have there can actually help towards broadening this agenda of standard setting in the continent. And the reason why we talk about showing this particular map itself is also just to give a context of Nestle in the continent itself. Nestle has been in the continent for over 100 odd years, and we split more or less into two geographic regions, Central West African region and then the East and Southern African region. From a Central West African region, we've got about 6,700 employees and 10 factories. And then in the Eastern Southern African region, coincidentally, the 1st of August was the time when this organization was reconfigured in the continent to make it more effective. And from 6 countries to 23 countries Johannesburg is the regional head office. For us, it's a great testament, I think, to the confidence of the organization in Johannesburg to serve as a regional hub for 23 countries. And also in the context of what the AOAC is trying to do, could this be an opportunity that we need to leverage, and seeing how we can better organize and harmonize the capabilities on the continent. You can see it's underscored by 850 million Swiss franc investment in capabilities. And the reason why we talk about the FDI, or the foreign direct investment, just supporting the previous presentations as well, is that up from 2014 and 10 years before that, our former chairman, Peter Brabeck, made a comment and a statement of fact, actually, that up until that time, the foreign investment capabilities or potential of all companies that invested in Africa exceeded the donor agency quantum and in removing X number of people out of poverty. And I think that's a very powerful sentiment from a sustainability of the continent itself. And getting back to this whole system of making business easier on the continent is one of the very direct ways of moving people out of poverty. And that's just a short explanation of maybe not saying how much we're investing versus the more I think we invest in the continent, the more we move people out of poverty. Our quality policy is very much clearly rooted in the confidence of the Nestle quality management system. For example, every call that we get into our call center, you'd be amazed to see the rigorous processes that go on in the background before we actually respond to the customer. The need to test quality samples, the need to do comparative studies, all come from a place of auditable reference material just so that consumers can, with confidence, consume our products without any fear. We also, of course, comply with all internal and external food safety mechanisms, and as a Nestle global policy, we compare the Nestle policy versus the country where we operate, and whichever is the higher of the two, we would always follow and implement with confidence. We gain zero defect and a no waste attitude to everyone in the company. We also are very important contributors to the food waste discussion that's happening, and just recently through the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa went on a European Union tour of some of the organizations and companies, and Nestle is firmly committed to making a contribution in that regard. Our NQMS, or Nestle, since we are in an environment of eminent scientists here, I'll go with the abbreviations. We'll call it the NQMS from now on. It's a compliance of quality standards and food safety for our consumers. It is simply non-negotiable at any level whatsoever. Our internal quality management system is regularly audited and verified by international certification organizations. Just recently we were pleased with the outcome of the ISO audit that was done in Johannesburg for all our plants in the region, and that's also a testament that the consumer just gets more confidence that you can buy products that are safe and with no issues from a consequence point of view. What are the pillars of our NQMS approach? We adopt the farm-to-fork approach. It's quality by design. A lot of rigor goes into how we actually get down to manufacturing the end result, and this is all built into the systems of which we manufacture. We also have the good manufacturing practice, and in some of the discussions you'll also interact with our head of technical, who's also here today, Mr. Kolile White, and you can also get a first-hand impression of what exactly we do in our plants and how we go about maintaining best practices in the world. And of course, consumer use is unwritten. Without a consumer, there's no point for our existence, and it's all about the consumer and how we actually get that down to the bottom T. The quality management system for us not only ensures our ongoing access to high quality raw materials, but it also enables farmers to protect or even increase their income. And many examples of this in the continent where, together with access to our scientific capabilities, farmers in many instances increase more yield, and for each plant of cocoa or coffee or whichever raw material it is, the more the productivity of the actual plant, both the farmer benefits and Nestle benefit from increased quality as well. Just to give you a landscape of the geographic spread of where our capabilities are, as you can see, we have 23 NQACs globally, and then all our ISO 9000, 17,000 and 25 accredited laboratories, and then the number of analytical tests, 1.75 million annually. We do a lot of testing, as you can see. Just to bring it back home from a South African perspective, this is where the NQAC in South Africa is located. It's about 50 kilometers south of Pretoria, and it's something that we need to leverage, I think, more as we go forward in this discussion. The aspect of public and private partnerships is something that I started off with the discussion of how we can leverage that better. I don't think there's any need for me to go into the GFSI, preaching to the converted. You are masters on that particular field. But for us, a key objective is to reduce food safety risk globally by delivering equivalence and convergence between effective food management systems. And also proud to say that the kickoff has happened 2 years ago in the Southern African region, when the colleagues from Switzerland and with regional authorities, we worked as a team to start speaking to regional government authorities on what we can agree to be as globally accepted norms and standards for testing of certain types of routines in the world of food safety. The gathering of industry members worldwide to work on food safety issues that affect the whole supply chain. It's a no-brainer from start to the end. You have to have the same types of testing. And then just speaking to Owen the other day, some opportunities arise as we start promoting the issue of intra-African regional trade, and where more of our indigenous raw materials are being sought both locally and globally. What more can we do to promote the common standards testing regimes for products that were not part of the focus in times before? And I think it's an opportunity that we can actually leverage more these days. The need for benchmarks and food safety, and just taking the discussion back briefly to the issue of testing. I suppose private sector, multinationals in particular, have had their fair share of negative press and media issues and perceptions as well. And I think this talk, the AOAC engagement success in engaging with very important organizations on the continent like the African Union, augurs very well to start narrowing the divide between private sector and authorities, just so that we can all strive towards, at the end of the day, giving consumers the confidence of consuming products. And I think we're going in a direction which is positive, I believe. Maybe not the end of the journey. We do know that there is a skepticism and a reality that exists between authorities and the private sector. However, I think it's a journey worth investing time in, because we need to demonstrate why we can be trusted. And in forums like this, we count and rely on very influential people to talk about what do we do to actually protect consumers and to protect our shareholders at the same time. We, of course, work with governments and other authorities, and we're just testing some ideas at the moment on how to leverage development agencies located throughout the continent who would maybe want to promote and contribute resources to a generalized system and way of testing. So I think this is very early stages at the moment, and the idea is how can we make an efficient and an effective way of promoting the objectives of the AOAC, leveraging a group of people with a common objective and doing it that way versus a very sporadic ad hoc approach. So in conclusion, how do we, the benefits of a food safety capacity building? I mean, it's very much repetition. I think at this stage, safe to say, the sharing of experiences which I've highlighted, and as Nestle East and Southern African region, we are very committed to this process and really would encourage more dialogue and engagement to see how we could leverage our footprint on the continent to help with this process, taking it forward, providing a foundation of science-based food regulations, and then the issue of keeping abreast of developments when it comes to emerging food safety issues. Nestle as a company can share a lot of experiences from all sorts of production capabilities and countries in terms of how we managed certain types of food safety issues to share, and so that more people could benefit from our learnings from those experiences. And then, of course, local community empowerment. It goes without saying that as a company with a responsibility, we need to make sure that at food handler level, for example, with our Healthy Kids program with the Department of Basic Education in South Africa, we also offer training classes to food handlers based at schools who are supporting the Food Nutrition Schools program. on the importance of hygiene in preparing food. You talk about between 500 and 1,000 kids in a school, and it's critical that the issue of food hygiene becomes top of mind as well. Harmonizing of the food safety regulations based on science will ensure that the same level of protection is awarded to consumers and actually favors trade, and I'd like to add, moves more people out of poverty sustainably than maybe what we thought in the past. Food safety knowledge sharing among stakeholders facilitates the development of a regulatory framework which guarantees safer foods for the consumers. So, ladies and gentlemen, on that note, I would like to just maybe reaffirm our support and confidence in this process, and congratulations to the AOAC for such sterling progress, and wishing us all a good couple of days for the next few days, actually. And welcome to South Africa. Sorry, I should have started off with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you again for this setting the stage introduction, Ravi, and we will continue with another presentation again to help us set the stage for further discussions. Eve, in her keynote introduction, mentioned the importance of quality infrastructure and the contribution of quality infrastructure in the effectiveness of standards, and that's definitely the case for food safety standards and for food safety testing standards as well. And to speak to us about this theme, we have with us Dr. Wynand Lowe. Dr. Lowe is currently the Director of Research, International and Infrastructure Development of the National Metrology Institute of South Africa. He actually served as the acting CEO upon the birth of the institute for about 5 years, and he has a background in inorganic chemistry and solid states physics applied to surface and structure analysis in various areas, including food. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Lowe.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. In Africa, from experience, I know by now that if you talk just before tea, you won't talk before tea, you will talk in tea. So my apologies that I'm not standing between you and tea, I'm standing in your tea. But I really plan to finish at about, at the latest 11. So let's see how it goes. And again, as the previous speaker said, we don't have the liberty of looking beautiful. So normally we would have nice slides that you can look at the slides and not us. So, okay. Eve spoke a lot about the CFTA already, and I'm going to summarize a bit here and not speak about it for too long. If we look at Africa at the moment and the regional economic communities there, we really want to get that going. We want to get trade going, first amongst the RECs or between the RECs, and then, of course, we want to improve the ability of Africa to trade with the rest of the world. So you heard about the meeting in Kigali, Rwanda, where the agreement was signed. And very importantly, at that meeting, the first protocols were signed. And for us, being in a quality infrastructure world, the very important protocol is the protocol on trade in goods. And I'll explain a little bit further. Also, a few other protocols were signed, but I don't think we need to go into that too much. So that was then followed by the summit in July in Nouakchott, Mauritania, where 5 additional countries actually signed the agreement, bringing the total to 49. And you know there are only 55 countries in Africa, so only 6 countries have not signed the agreement. But okay, the agreement is one thing, and I'll explain that a little bit later as well. The important things are the instruments and how are we actually going to put the agreement into practice. So at that meeting in Nouakchott, a very important protocol, or the annex to the protocol, was the annex to the protocol in trade in goods. And again, that is the one that we from the quality infrastructure world basically has to deal with. So let's quickly look at the mechanisms of the African continental free trade area. So in the first place, you have the agreement, and as we already said, the agreement has been signed by 49 countries. The next thing, as Yves also explained, will be a customs union. I read an article where they said a customs union in Africa is still a far way off. And I think in Africa, if we say a far way off, it is a far way off. So I think, let's just be honest with each other, it's still a far way off. But the aim that we have at the moment is really to remove 90% of tariff lines to have a zero duty in 5 years from now, so by 2023. And that is again already a very big task. Yves spoke about the establishment of a common market. I'm not going to say anything more about that. The next thing, of course, is that establishment of the monetary union. At the moment in Africa, if you can see there on the slides, we've got 3 monetary unions as well already. In the south, we've got the SACU, and basically South Africa, Swaziland, Lesotho, Namibia. So we use basically the same currency. They have got their own currencies, but it's all coupled to the rand. So it's exactly the same as the rand. In the middle of Africa there, on the dark blue part, you have the Central African franc that's already in use. And that light blue area there, you've got the Western Africa franc that is already in use. So finally, we are planning to have a single currency in Africa. But again, I think that is quite some distance in the future. Why a quality infrastructure? I'm quite sure that all of you sitting in this room know exactly why one needs a quality infrastructure. So I'm not going to go into that. But I think for Africa, what does it mean? What are we really focusing on? And for us, when we talk about the QI, in addition to enhanced product quality and compatibility and safety and health, it's really about increased trade opportunities. And you know that our intra-trade in Africa, the percentage of that is really very low. So what happens in Africa is that all of us basically try to trade with the rest of the world. We don't really trade with ourselves. And that is, of course, a big concern and something that we want to address. So I'm just having that slide there to say QI deficiencies create trade imbalances and new trade orders. And why do we say that? If you now have countries or regions where you have a very well-developed QI, and you've got regions next to it, say higher up in Africa, this part, without the well-developed QI, you have the situation that the countries with the well-developed QI will be manufacturing, and they will have the ability to test products that comes into their country. So what you find is that they really start to prosper, and it's really a trade imbalance. That if you look at the southern part there, the countries shown here in blue, we know what happened when we started at SACU. Basically, most of the trade came to South Africa, and the idea was really to have more trade from South Africa to the rest of the region as well. But okay, we need to address that. And Yves already said that the moment you start to remove the tariff barriers, you start to get other things in place. And I made a slide to show that when custom measures are removed, technical barriers start to replace it. If you look at that map there of the world, the darkest colors are the countries with the most protectionist measures taken since 2008. And so there are 2 reasons for that. Of course, like the United States, and I must be careful, I know there are people from the US here, I normally make a few jokes about that, but you see the US there is the darkest color. And of course, there are 2 reasons, because they're the biggest economy in the world, so everyone wants to export to them. The other thing is they have got the QI in place to measure, to test. And that is the other reason why they can put these measures in place. Now, if you are a country here in the middle part of Africa, and you don't have that, you see that there are very few protectionist measures in place. But you see what happened here with Southern Africa when we started the SACU. Then immediately this whole region started to put more protectionist measures in place. So if we talk about measurement as part of, to get rid of technical barriers to trade, I'm basically saying that the measurement requirement in a technical regulation or voluntary standard only becomes a barrier to trade if you can't measure it. And then you're on the abyss. If you can't measure it in any one of these free trade areas, you've got a problem. So you need to be able, or you need to put those things in place. So a quality infrastructure. So I know Eve was going to talk about standardization and explain basically the QI to you, so I'm not going to go into detail. So basically, at the national level, you will have a national standards body that in the old days really developed national standards. These days, much more adopt international standards for your country. Of course, it's changed a bit. Then you've got the National Metrology Institute, and that body is normally responsible to see to the application of the international system of units in your country and to establish and maintain national measurement standards. And normally those two bodies have got a very good relationship because there will also be a standard like ISO 80,000, basically detailing all those units in your country. Of course, you will have a national accreditation body. You all know what that is for. If you don't, there's Ron Usais, the CEO of SONAS as well. You can ask Ron. And all of us basically work together, the three of us. Normally there's a legal metrology institute as well in the whole picture. But in this case, we basically just put it with that one. So together, we make sure that the right standards are in place, that the regulations are in place, to really help those bodies at the bottom, the certification bodies, the inspection bodies, the testing laboratories, the calibration laboratories, and finally to have the whole system in place to the benefit of the authorities, the consumers, and the general public. So at the international level, basically you all know the international bodies, so standardization, of course there's ISO and IEC. For metrology, there's the International Bureau of Weights and Measures, the BIPM, for scientific metrology, and for legal metrology, the International Organization of Legal Metrology. And that is, or accreditation, of course, ILAC and IAF. At the regional level, we have the RMOs, or the Regional Metrology Organizations. These days, we do have regional standards organizations like ARSO, and you have the regional accreditation associations like AFRAC now in Africa. And of course, then you have your national organizations, then your service providers, and we all work for those at the bottom. So this is just to show you very quickly how our system in Africa then looks, as Eve already explained. So there you have the international bodies, there you've got the Pan-African Quality Infrastructure Institutions. AFSEC is the one for electrotechnical standards, so they work very closely with ARSO, of course, but the four of us together basically then makes up the continental quality infrastructure. Legal metrology and scientific metrology both are within AfriMet, so AfriMet represents both. So at the national level, we've already spoken about that. So Paki has got a strategic plan, and I'm not going to read through that, but basically just the top sentence there, Paki will speed up the drive towards regional integration and regional trade, and hence be pivotal in the creation of sustainable and viable markets, thereby removing technical barriers to trade. So it's a very big statement, but we are all working very hard towards that. So let's talk about measurement a bit. I'm for the National Metrology Institute, and of course we see the measurement and testing part of that as the most important part of the QI, but of course they're all equally important. So that is AfriMet. We had SANICMET in the old days, and then we formed AfriMet from 2007. So it took us about 12 years to get most of the countries in Africa with a measurement capability to become members of AfriMet. And at the moment we've got 46, basically 47 members now with Liberia. And you can see we're also basically based on the REC. So at the southern part here, you've got SADC-MET based on the SADC, and there you've got EAMET based on EAC, and so CEMAC-MET based on the CEMAC countries, SWAMET based on the UMOA countries, the countries there in the red basically based on the AMU, and these countries here at that time could not organize themselves into an REC, so that's basically everything that was left, and Egypt organized these countries into the North, East and West metrology, sub-regional metrology organization of AfriMet. So we're getting there. The only countries at the moment that do not belong to AfriMet are basically Somalia, Djibouti, Eritrea, Guinea, and a few of the small islands, of course, Sao Tome and Principe in that region there to make up the 55 countries. If you work in metrology, of course, try to become a member of the BIPM, basically saying that you can participate at that level in the international activities of measurement. And so when we started AfriMet, there were only three countries, actually South Africa, Kenya, and Egypt, that were full members of the BIPM. And then we had two associate countries. That's your first step towards becoming a member, and that was Ghana and Tunisia. Now, 12 years on, we basically have another full member, Tunisia, and we've got 9 associates. And you can see we're basically now connecting the continent from the south to the north. So at least we can really bring back home the international metrology expertise to Africa. We have a system where we categorize the countries in terms of their capabilities. And we have it for all the QI pillars, but this one is for metrology. And basically we are saying if you're red there, you don't have scientific metrology capabilities in your country. And if you are gold, you're at the highest level, you're a full member of the BIPM, you participate at the international level, and to get that international recognition for your measurement capabilities. Now it still looks a bit red, but if you look carefully, you can see there was a lot of movement from that map to this map, not only by removing some red parts, like Burundi, for example, and Mauritania, but also moving up the ladder. So a lot of countries that just had a very basic capability in those days now have got quite a good capability, and they became associates of our International Conference of Weights and Measures. So basically meaning that they can also participate in our international comparisons already. We also have one for legal metrology, and there it looks quite good, although I must say a lot of these countries here in this area basically will have a person or 2 or 3 in the government department, and then basically that is their legal metrology capability, but they don't have people on the ground that can really do the inspections and everything. So there's still a lot of work to be done to get them to at least the green color. In our metrology world, we develop our capabilities, and at the time that it's world-class, basically, we publish it as calibration and measurement capabilities in an international database held by the BIPM. And that basically means then that it's internationally recognized. And if you can show traceability to those CMCs, all countries that have signed this agreement, the International Committee of Weights and Measures Mutual Recognition Arrangement, must basically accept those capabilities from your country. So as an NMI, you try to get all your measurement capabilities published in that database. Now in Africa at the moment, we've got 623 of those capabilities already published from these countries. So this Egypt, South Africa, Kenya, Tunisia, Zimbabwe, Namibia. And basically what it means is that, say South Africa also has the same 39 CMCs as NIS Egypt in our 533. Then it means we've got international recognition for those capabilities, and basically there will be mutual recognition between Egypt and South Africa for those capabilities. So the easiest thing for Africa would of course have been to get that international recognition right at the top for all the countries, and then basically we've got regional compatibility, and we can all trade with each other because we've got international recognition for all our capabilities. But you saw from that previous map, and you saw the number of countries that already has got those CMCs published. So it's a long way off before all African countries will have that. So what we have done is, we've started the secondary level, and basically what we are doing now is to say, okay, fine, there are 4 countries in Africa that has got that international recognition. So what can we do to get the whole continent to have that mutual recognition for intra-trade? In Africa, our strategy is then to say, okay, fine, so those main NMIs, the 4 in Africa, will then make sure that the secondary level NMIs in their regions have calibrated secondary standards. So SADC, the countries, comes to South Africa and calibrate secondary standards with against our standards here. So in that way, we can get all the other NMIs in Africa to at least have a traceability link to the primary labs. And then we want to describe all their services in a quality system, and their accreditation ISO 17025 is a very good start. And if we do all of that for all the NMIs in Africa, we finally will have mutual recognition for intra-regional trade in Africa. So I think that is the big message that I wanted to give today. There are a few more slides, but I'm not really going to go into detail. Just to say that we talk a lot about shortening the traceability chain for Africa, and that just means that we in Africa want to make sure that we do primary realizations of the SI units, and that we can give traceability to the SI, and that we don't always need to go to Europe or the United States or somewhere else to get traceability. You probably all know that next week, the 16th of November, the International Metrology World is going to redefine the SI units, and they're going to redefine it 4 of the 7 units. And the main one is, of course, the kilogram. So we're going to get rid of the last artifact standard in the world, international standard in the metrology world, and that's the kilogram. So the international prototype of the kilogram. Because at the moment, the unit of mass in the world is the kilogram is the unit of mass. It is equal to the mass of the international prototype of the kilogram. When you sign the meter convention, you just buy a copy of that. South Africa has got copy number 56, and then you will calibrate everything against your copy. You will calibrate your copy against the IPK about every 10 years or so. But now the whole system is going to change. And the new definition are going to be, we fix the value of the Planck constant. I'm not going to go into the technical details now, but basically it will just say that the kilogram is the SI unit of mass. It is defined by taking the fixed numerical value of the Planck constant to be that. So how are you going to realize the kilogram now? Because now it's not an artifact anymore, you're going to realize it. And basically there are 2 ways. The one is a watt balance, and it's just basically balancing gravitational force with an electrical force. You do a few fancy things in an instrument that will cost you about 10 to 20 million rand, and then you've got the kilogram, no problem. So the problem is, of course, to develop this for Africa. And a few projects are on the way. South Africa has signed with the UK and with the National Physical Laboratory. We are developing a tabletop watt balance to bring to Africa. 2 of our engineers are there at the moment doing the joint development, and we will get basically the first one, and then we will establish it here in Africa. I'm getting looks from the chair. I'm going to finish in like 1 minute. So now we will have a watt balance. Hopefully in South Africa, and Tunisia is the next country that's planning to basically develop one. We will then calibrate reference kilograms for countries, and they will then calibrate their transfer mass standards, and finally we will calibrate the users' masses. And in that way we'll have primary traceability for mass in Africa. So there are a few projects on the go in Africa, really to shorten that traceability chain. The Africa Matrix Reference Materials, there are some of my colleagues talking about that later, so I'm not going to say anything about that. The watt balance we've already spoken about. We also are doing the X-ray crystal density project. That's another way to realize the kilogram, but also a primary way to realize the mole, the Avogadro number. So NMISA is also participating in a project there. Kenya is also interested. And we are doing a few other things. Eventually, the Kelvin for temperature will also now be redefined, but the ITS 90 scale will stay in place for the moment as the primary standard, but eventually they will change the way in which you realize the Kelvin, and then there are things like primary acoustic gas thermometry that you would need, and NMISA is also working on that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you very much for this great presentation, and I guess we're looking forward to the update of the unit system and the acquisition of that fancy machine. So before we get to the break, we have actually something that we would like to share with you. As you know, the creation of the AOAC Sub-Saharan Africa section is the result of a lot of effort, definitely of everybody who is within the region, but also from a number of people within the leadership current and past leadership of AOAC International. And in order to acknowledge that, I would like to invite back the president of the AOAC Sub-Saharan Africa section, and we would like to acknowledge, amongst everybody who helped set things in motion, two leaders of AOAC International. I'm going to let Owen speak to that.
Thank you very much, Sam. And so I think we couldn't end this first session of the morning without showing appreciation for a couple of people who was really instrumental in making this happen. So I'd first like to invite my friend and colleague, Eric Collings, as a show of appreciation for his relentless support for the creation and development of this section. And our membership thought that this would be very fitting to show appreciation to. Please, if you can. And I will ask my colleague and fellow AOAC member, Jane DeVos, to present this to you. I'd just like to call another special person who was the president of AOAC International at that time when we initiated this, and whose support really made this happen as well. So Diane Banish, please come to the stage. So thanks very much. We would like to thank David, certainly, for his support, for getting us there. So I think the next year we will get you the elephant. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Owen. And as you can see, AOAC is definitely a family, and we are building, in fact, the Sub-Saharan Africa AOAC sub-family to contribute to the bigger group. So with that, actually, we arrive at the end of this particular session. I would like to thank all the speakers for their contributions. So a good round of, I don't know how we'd call it, applause, South African way, to all the speakers. And